En este video voy a hablar de todos los tiempos verbales en español. Tenemos el presente, present tense. Present tense is used to talk about things that are currently happening right now, things that usually happen, or things that will happen soon. It's kind of a catch-all tense. You can use it to talk about the immediate present, the general present, and also a little bit of the future. Here are the endings. For AR, it goes o, as, a, amos, ais, an. For ER, it goes OSE, hemos, eis, en. And for IR, it goes OSE, imos, is, en. Segundo, tenemos el presente progresivo, which is used to express things that are currently happening, things that are happening right now. You have two parts of the present progressive. The first is the verb estar, which you need to conjugate in the present tense, and el gerundio, the gerund. In other words, the thing that makes it ing. For AR verbs, that's ando, and for ER and IR verbs, that's yendo. Entonces tenemos el presente perfecto. El presente perfecto expresses things that have happened once, or things that happened in the recent past. And by recent past, I mean things that happened earlier that day or the previous day. So very, very recently in the past. The present perfect has two parts to it. First is the verb haber, conjugated in the present tense, which goes has, a, hemos, habéis, han. And then you add the past participle of whatever verb you want to talk about. The past participle for AR is hado, and the past participle for ER and IR is ido. And I want to point out that these always end in o. It's always hado, like hablado, tomado, etc. Past tenses, but remember that Spanish has several different past tenses. The first one is el imperfecto, which is used for describing things in the past. Someone's age, how they were feeling, what sort of character traits or physical traits they had, what the weather was like, etc. It's also used for ongoing and habitual actions, things that are still happening today or things that happened over and over. The endings for AR are ava, avas, ava, avamos, avais, avan. The ending for ER and IR are ia, ias, ia, iamos, iais, ian. We have el pretérito, which is one of Spanish's past tenses. The preterite is used for one-time actions, a sequence of events, or actions in a time frame. The AR endings are e, aste, o, amos, astes, aron, and the ER and IR endings are I, iste, yo, imos, istes, ieron. But this tense has a lot of irregular verbs. We have el pluscuamperfecto. El pluscuamperfecto, called pluperfect in English, is a way to express something that happened way in the past. Something that had happened, usually before something else. For example, I had traveled to Florida before I went to South Carolina. The pluscuamperfecto is formed by conjugating the verb haber in the imperfect tense, and then adding the participio pasado to the end of whatever verb you want to conjugate. For AR, that's hado. For ER and IR, that's ido. And remember that these always end in o. To get into more tenses, I want to talk about passive voice, which is something that we sometimes see in the past tense. La voz pasiva, it is a different sentence structure that you can use that puts the emphasis on the action and the person or object receiving the action rather than the subject, in other words, the person doing the action. So to form the passive voice, you start with the verb ser, and that's usually conjugated in the preterite, but you can also use the passive voice in the present if you want to. The preterite conjugations of ser are fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuistes, fueron, and then you add the past participle to whatever verb you want to talk about. That's hado for AR, and for ER and IR it's ido. But for this tense, the passive voice, the O changes depending on the gender of the subject of the sentence. For example, if I said I was attacked by a bear, since I'm a girl, I would say fui atacada instead of atacado. And also if something is plural, you would need to add an S. Is el se impersonal. This is a structure that's used as an alternative to the passive voice. It really means the same thing. To make the impersonal se, first you need the word se, and then you put that se in front of the conjugated verb, whatever verb you want to talk about. This can be used in the present tense or the preterite tense. This is a very neutral expression, and it sort of gets rid of the subject altogether. Well, as you're driving around, you may see signs that say "Se habla español." That means Spanish is spoken. It doesn't say who speaks it. It just says that it's spoken. So it's very neutral, and there's really no people involved. We have the el futuro, which is a future tense. And the future tense expresses things that will happen with certainty. And it's also used to express guesses and conclusions. If you have a sentence that in English you would say, I wonder if, blah, 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 you would actually use the future tense in Spanish. It's also used to make conclusions, so if you had a sentence that went, I guess, blah, 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 that could also be future tense. Future tense is a little bit different than the other tenses that we've been studying because the endings go on to the infinitive. Normally we remove the AR, ER, and IR at the end, but in the future tense we don't. So the endings are down here. All the endings are the same for AR, ER, and IR verbs. It goes as, a, hemos, eis, and on. Future perfect, el futuro perfecto, which is used to express things that will have happened, and also, just like in the future tense, guesses and conclusions. Next we have el condicional, which is the conditional, and that's used to express things that would happen hypothetically. Just like in the future tense, the endings of the conditional go on the infinitive. Otherwise, you're just conjugating in the imperfect and you'll confuse people. All the endings are the same for AR, ER, and IR. It's ia, ias, ia, iamos, iais, ian. El condicional perfecto, which is a conditional perfect, and that expresses things that would have happened hypothetically. Just like in the conditional and the future perfect, the endings go on the infinitive of the verb haber. So it's habría, habrías, habría, habríamos, habríais, habrían, and then the past participle for AR that's hado, for ER and IR that's ido, and since this is a perfect tense and not the passive voice, those always end in O. Those that I've talked about so far are what's called the indicative. Now we're moving on to your favorite, the subjunctive. We're going to start with present subjunctive. El presente del subjuntivo expresses wishes, desires, suggestions, opinions, negations, etc. Subjunctive is special because it can't exist on its own. It has to be attached to an indicative clause. For example, I want you to clean your room. Or it's nice that people are nice to each other. Or it's important that you take notes, etc. Conjugating in the subjunctive is a little bit funky. So there's kind of a four-step process when you want to conjugate in the subjunctive. First, you take the verb and you conjugate it in the yo form in the present tense. My example is an irregular verb, tener, because I wanted to show you what happens with irregular verbs. So we start with tengo. Step 2 is we drop the o, so we end up with teng. Then we add the opposite ending. So since tener is an ER verb, we add an a. Then we conjugate the verb however you need to. That might be tenga for yo, or tengas for tú, etc. We have el presente perfecto del subjuntivo, which is present perfect subjunctive. It expresses the same things as present subjunctive, it just expresses them in the past. And just like present subjunctive, it needs to be attached to an indicative clause that triggers the subjunctive. To make the present perfect subjunctive, you conjugate the verb haber in the present subjunctive, and then you add the past participle, which is hado or ido, and it always ends in o because this is a perfect tense and not the passive voice. Finally, our last tense es el imperfecto del subjuntivo, imperfect subjunctive. This expresses the exact same things as present perfect subjunctive, and it works the exact same way as present perfect subjunctive, and you can honestly use them interchangeably, but I would say that the imperfect subjunctive is more common. The way to conjugate in the imperfect subjunctive is you start with the ellos, ellas, ustedes form in the preterite tense. That's going to end in something ron, so you drop the ron, and you add one of these endings, ra, ras, ra, ramos, rais, ran. If you're adding the nosotros, if you're conjugating the nosotros form, you need to add an accent to whatever letter comes before ramos. You have it. Now you know every single tense in Spanish.